Do you have an intro, a clever intro? You got to mock Jesus?
You know it.
Make your funnies on this one, Matt.
Now I want to do something funny just to throw it in your face. I don't have any jokes about Jesus. Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome to TV Guys. My name is Matt.
And my name, as always, is Brian.
And we are here to talk about TV. And this week, it's a very special week. It's Easter week. That's right. Last Sunday was Palm Sunday. This Sunday is Easter Sunday. Tomorrow is Good Friday. Today is Mediocre Thursday. We're just in the middle of all of it. It's great. And so to celebrate that, we're going to talk about one of the biggest crowd-funded pieces of media to ever hit the planet. And that is the TV series Chosen, about Jesus and others.
And others. You know, honestly, I wouldn't call Jesus the main character of the show. I think it focuses more on the disciples and their relationship to Jesus. I mean, obviously he's an important figure, you know, in the Bible. In the stories, there really wouldn't be a story without him.
You know, we could do this show without Jesus. That's fine.
See, Matt and I are now playing the part of the Pharisees.
We've stepped into this role. You know, it's kind of funny. There was a church I was at in Duluth, and they did for so many years this play at Easter. Every year they do this play called The Choice. And every year the Pharisees were always played by the pastors of the church. And they didn't do it while I was there, but I just kind of felt weird about that. I'm like, why would you advertise? Why would you be like, yes, I want to play that role. I want to be the Pharisee, the hypocritical religious leader. Like, yeah. I don't want to put myself in that role on purpose.
You know, this will be a flashback for some of our listeners, but when Matt and I met, we were both going to the church called Bethel in Minneapolis. And for years, Bethel did the same Easter play every year. And one of the roles, I forget who he was, one of the greedy characters who always wanted money, was played by our friend Wilbur. And he had the same song every year. He would go, just a little bit more. And it was like this whole song and dance. So like, and even I've seen Facebook statuses where people like mention Wilbur and mention that song he did year after year after year in the Easter program. But the funniest thing is one year, Jesus fell off the cross. So the foothold on the cross where he was standing gave out. I don't think he fell completely off, but it was definitely a noticeable Jesus falling off the cross in the middle of the Easter production.
He's come down from the cross. He is the Son of God.
He's got 2-day shipping. He doesn't have to wait 3 days.
Jeez. Yeah, take that. Amazon's getting the one up. And Jesus like, you know what? You know how hard it is to come back to life? Pretty hard.
All right, Matt, so you're the expert. You've watched the show more than I kind of just binged it all in the past week and a half or so. So what are your initial thoughts, reactions to The Chosen?
So I don't know if anyone out there is like me. And Brian, I think you're a little like this, that for the longest time is like when you put Christian in front of some sort of media, it's almost like a bad word. It's like the King of the Hill quote where he's like, don't call it Christian rock. You're not making Christianity better. You're making rock worse. That sort of thing. That they're like, well, we can just, it was kind of like these people that didn't have the most creative talent, or maybe they did. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't judge them in that regard, but they cared so much about the content of what they were doing that they didn't care about the technical stuff that is also important. Yeah. And so when everyone's talking about this new show coming out or that has come out, like, oh, you should watch it. You should watch it. I'm like, you know, I didn't want to. It wasn't one that I was jumping to go watch. And so Angie started watching it, but she'd be in the room while I was in the room with it. So I would hear it and I wouldn't watch it. I would just hear it going on. But I'm like, oh, this is actually really good writing. I'm really intrigued by this dialogue. And then I started watching it with her. And then I rewatched all the episodes that she had watched. And I'm like, whoa, this is actually really good.
Yeah.
And I was just blown away by it because I hadn't seen any sort of Christian writing in media that is as good as The Chosen. And there's actually like one that I use as like my go-to example when I'm talking about it. And so it's in the first season when this was the area where I'm like, okay, this is a great show. That was my confirmation.
Is it the Nicodemus and Jesus talk?
That's a great talk, but this was like my initial like, oh, this is really good writing. And it was actually at the wedding. So there, Jesus' first miracle, if you're familiar and you haven't watched the show, is that he changes water into wine at a wedding. And a lot of people know about that miracle. But there was someone at the wedding that he was talking about like what he did. And it was just kind of like like, let me get to know you sort of a thing. Like, what do you do? I'm a stone carver. And so he starts talking about his work and he's like, the hardest part is that first initial mark that you make on the stone, because once you make that mark, you can't go back. The stone is never going to be the same, and you have to go from there. And it was like, as he was going on this monologue about it, it was showing Jesus giving the instruction to the servants to how to change the water into wine and what he was telling them to do. And I'm like, this is really good juxtaposition. Mm-hmm. What a genius way to present his first miracle and give you the weight and gravitas of what he's doing. And from there, I was like, yeah, I need to watch every single episode. It's so good.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the only one I had seen was we did a previous episode about a year ago where you gave me the episode about the kids. And that episode, everything is such a bottle episode where it's not really, and I skipped that one on the rewatches for time's sake, but not really involved in the story overall. But I think that was an important one because is that the first introduction of Jesus, or was it right after he healed Mary and then this?
Yeah, so we see Jesus barely in the first episode, but again, as you said, this show is a lot more about the disciples' reaction, about the people around him, including Mary. And so in the second episode, it is more focused on him, but still it follows a lot of perspective from the kids. And so you do see more of him, but it's kind of like, in the first 10 minutes of this episode, you don't see a lot of him, or you see like from the bushes where the kids are looking at him. And it's that same sort of thing of like, this is how we're going to get him revealed to us truly is through the eyes of children. And I'm like, that is so genius the way you're doing it. Like you said, it's filler and it doesn't move the story.
It is, but it isn't. It's the storyline of it doesn't match up. I think it's a great introduction to Jesus as the character. And I think that is important going forward. And so in that way, it's not filler, but you could easily call it filler.
Yeah. Yeah. So this show has some really good characters too. As I said, the writing is fantastic. So there's a lot of really well-written characters. So who would you say would be your top or maybe your top two characters in the show?
First, I would say Nicodemus, because seeing that from that perspective of someone who's supposed to be all about logistical laws and Jesus is breaking all these laws, but you can tell from the beginning, like he senses something and he kind of can tell right away there's more to the story. That's why he's like not jumping to like persecute Jesus. He's like, let me talk to him. Let me find out more about him. He's like so invested in it. And then also Matthew, because Matthew is, I don't know if this is insensitive. Is he portrayed as kind of being autistic?
Yeah, you get that sense. They didn't have that sort of terminology back then, so no one's going to put that label on him. But you can tell from watching it that they're going with that sort of, he's on the spectrum in some regards for how he acts
and how he kind of, if everything was black and white to him, it's like like everything comes down to numbers. And there's that one scene where it's him and another character, and like, what are the odds? And then the guy's like, you two are actually calculating the odds, aren't you? But at the same time, he's like totally in on Jesus' teachings and like didn't hesitate to follow him. And it's just an interesting character.
Yeah, he is such a good character. I love what they did with him because it is just a completely different way of thinking about this character. You never, now going back into Matthew and reading it, you're like, I don't know if that's true, if he was that way. but the amount of detail he put into it, or like why when he's writing the gospel, he decides it is super important that the first thing we do is establish Jesus's genealogy. That would make sense for someone like Matthew, how they portray him in this show. And even, and that's what I love about this show, is that it is historical fiction. So, you know, not everything is going to be 100% accurate, but it is all completely in line with the truths of scripture. So maybe the stuff that doesn't line up, you'll be like, okay, that's just narrative license. That's completely fine. There's nothing to me that I've watched, I'm like, oh, they changed this and it made it blasphemous. It's all like, okay, I get that this is an interpretation that they're going with, and I can get behind it even if I don't specifically agree. And that's why I like that it reaches so many different people. Lutherans, Methodists, Baptists, we all have different ideas of who Jesus is. But this does good enough job of like staying true to that, while also even embellishing whether you agree with those embellishments or not.
Yeah. And you can see it as Matthew is writing things down. He's clearly writing the book of Matthew and saying something like someone else is writing something. It doesn't need to be exact. You just need to write down what happened. He's like, no, mine will be precise. I'm going to write all the details, you know?
Yeah. That I was going to bring up that interaction, him and John. That's a great interaction. I'm glad that they opened season 2 with that.
Mm-hmm. You know, one thing that I was thinking that it's got to be difficult, and I'm sure a lot of research and when it went into making the show, is making sure you're not being like insensitive or getting things wrong for culturally at the time. Like all the lingo, like calling mothers Ima or calling the Sabbath Shabbat. I mean, I'm sure these are all like accurate terms, but you'd want to get it right. And like, for me, I have no idea. I mean, about all these terms and what everything should look like. And so that's something impressive. I'm sure that they had to do a lot of consulting with experts and making sure that if we're going to do this, we want it to look authentic.
Yeah. Or to read and study and make sure you understand some of the stuff of like the boring books, as I like to call them, of the Bible, like Leviticus or Exodus, or like the second half of Exodus, or even Deuteronomy in some regard, and Numbers. Like they do a lot of references to the history of the law. And there are some parts of the Bible that are just completely historical that you're like, I don't feel like there's any context for me in my modern day setting for me to know about. Well, this is the blood offering of 2 pigeons and 1 pigeon gets burnt on fire. And, you know, like we don't need to know that so much nowadays, but they needed to know that to make sure that they would represent that well. And I that is impressive. You're absolutely right.
And even little things like, it's crazy to see how society was back then. Like when I made the comment, I mean, obviously this is 2,000 years ago. I mean, you could even go back 50 years and like women have like next to no rights.
Yeah.
And something like they made a comment, if a woman's husband dies and she's the only witness to verify that he died, then he's technically not dead and she can't remarry. It's like, well, that's messed up. But it's like, that's just how life was back then. And we can't go back and change it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do like that this show has good representation that's not forced as well, where it's like that's what Jesus did. He did empower the women that were with him. There were several women that were a part of this group, and they might not get listed as the quote unquote 12 disciples because again, they're women, but they still are important, and they still had a voice in that day to the people that would listen. And so it was really great to show both society didn't treat them that they had that voice, but Jesus allowed them to have that voice. Like he encouraged that voice, and he brought that out of them, and is like, this is a safe place for you I want to hear from my daughters. And so they do a really good job on that side of it too, without it making like, because there's also sometimes when that can go just too far of like, you know, that side as emphasized as much as it is and that it almost diminishes like males or whatever. Like go female power so much that it's like males are diminished. And so it was good that it wasn't one of those things where it's like they rewrote the Bible just to have that as the agenda, but instead to say, no, Jesus cares about every single person, whether the law agrees with that or not in that day. Jesus cares about hearing from the people that are marginalized wherever we are in society and wherever we are in history. Jesus wants to hear from people who might not have as much of a voice as the majority.
Yeah, exactly. And there are moments that that are really relatable. I mean, obviously based on the Bible, which by the Bible's relatable, but
Wow.
if you couldn't tell by now, the stance of TV guys is Bible good.
Yay Bible is our official motto.
Right, sounds good. I didn't know we had a motto, but I guess it's
we,
Yay Bible.
We do. I say that every single week before we start. I'm always like, Yay Bible. You're like, why are you doing that?
Yeah, I'm talking specifically like when Mary leaves and then she goes into the city and does all of her stuff, and then she's like, I can't go back. Like, Jesus healed me once, he fixed me once. How can I go back after screwing up again? As like, how many that I feel like everybody can relate to that. Like, it's not like, oh, you get saved and then I'm never gonna sin again. Like,
yeah. And of course the disciples, they didn't understand it and they did put blame on Mary, but Jesus was like, no, that's you come back to me as many times as you want and I'm always going to be here, and you are never going to go back to being Lilith. You are Mary, and I have saved you from that. And there's a lot of really good lessons, like every single episode there's some really good stuff. So let's get into, actually before we get into that, I brought up characters and you brought up Nicodemus. We didn't talk about him that much. I do want to mention how Nicodemus's arc is the best part of the show for me. And so him not coming back in season 2, I didn't announce that there's spoilers at the beginning of this episode, but there are, obviously. So he doesn't come back for season 2. I really want to see more of him because, first of all, I love the actor. Secondly, that scene that you talked about when he's having the discussion with Jesus in the second to last episode of season 1, and then the moment at the very end of season 1 where he like is ready to leave with his disciples and he kind of knows that Nicodemus is listening and he's like, there was supposed to be another person, but he will not be joining us, knowing that Nicodemus can't make the sacrifice to follow Jesus that he wants to do. Like, that scene breaks my heart. Yeah. It's so sad because, again, you talked about relatability, and we all know either times in our life where we're like, yeah, I'm pro God, but what he's asking me to do or what he's requiring of me or what I need to do to get to the next step of my relationship with him is too much for me to do right now. And either we know that from ourselves that have done that, or we know people who have made that choice, like, no, I can't let go of addiction or, whatever.
And Nicodemus did leave money for them to find, and you could tell like Jesus looked at the wall knowing that Nicodemus was around the corner and just said, you're so close.
Yeah. Oh man. So now there's that transition I wanted to get into. This show has a lot of good themes, a lot of good teachable moments, and a lot of emotional spots. So what would you say might be a top emotional moment for you from this show?
Well, I mean, that one we just talked about was a really good one too. I think, and then I think anytime, I think it happened twice when the demon possessed people get healed is also a really powerful moment, both with Mary and then there was a guy that happened later on too.
Yeah, and that's really cool. Of like they're trying to like navigate it, and Jesus just comes up, and is like, get out. Like, that's it. It's not some pomp and circumstance. He's just like, nope, you're gone. Mm-hmm. He's like a bouncer at a club. He just walks up like, all right, time to leave, fella. Mm-hmm. Kicks him out. I liked so again, Nicodemus. I liked that. I liked there was I didn't expect to be as drawn into the call of Nathan in the 3rd episode of the 2nd season, or maybe the 2nd episode. Because when they called Nathaniel, he's not like a disciple before going into the show. He's not a disciple like, oh, I know lots about Nathaniel. I could give you information about Nathaniel, because he's not mentioned a ton in the Bible, but the stuff that he is mentioned about, it makes its way into this call of him. And I realized afterwards that what they did with Nathaniel's character was it was the same as Dallas's journey, the writer and the director of it. And so, in that 2nd episode or 3rd episode, whatever it was, his dream that he'd been planning and shooting for all of his life comes crashing down around him. And he sits in a spot where he starts talking to God and is just like, I don't have this dream anymore. You were supposed to be there for me. I thought this is what I was supposed to do. And now without it, I don't know who I am. And so when he meets Jesus, then Jesus tells him, I saw you praying under that tree. I saw you. And you didn't feel seen in that. You felt like you were alone or that you had failed. But I saw you, and that moment, and I'm still here seeing you now, calling you to me. And so Dallas shared about that. Dallas Jenkins, he talked about how, like, after a movie he did, because he did this movie called the something of Gavin Stone, the resurrection of Gavin Stone, or something like that. And it was a Christian movie, and it was a big budget one, and it just didn't go anywhere. And so he's like, so that was a huge failure in his eyes. And he had a moment like that Nathaniel had, and he put that into the character. And like, you can tell when stuff like that happens. I could tell, like I said, I wasn't expecting to be moved by that, but it was so sincere and so honest because it actually happened to someone. And, you know, we also all have moments like that where it's like we feel like we failed, and, you know, like, to know that in those moments God saw us is really inspiring.
Yeah, that really is.
Any other emotional moments? Because I got one other one I can talk about.
Not off the top of my head. What's your other one?
How about the so it's kind of two in one episode, but it's the man at the pool when Jesus heals him and he's able to stand.
Oh yeah.
And so that episode was one that not only had a really emotional payoff, but the beginning of the episode, and this is where we can get into this part, because they do a lot of technical stuff well. There's a lot that you can tell they care about the technical side. And so they start off this episode with a long, like 10 to 12 minute montage with not a single line of dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
That's really impressive. They tell the story of two different characters and their life story of where they got to where they are and how they got there. And you have this empathy towards them and this understanding. And again, not a single line of dialogue. That is so well written and so smart of how they did that. And then they pay it off at the end of the episode, and it moves that plot forward as well. You know, that one was a really good episode for me.
Yeah, and that one just shows even more. It's like a guy was paralyzed and now he can walk, and you're worried about him carrying something on set. Like,
yeah, and that's a good point, because it shows us his perspective too. Not that we don't like think of someone. You know, like, we hear the story like, yeah, he's been paralyzed for as long as he can remember. I can feel bad for him. But they show you him growing up that way. And so you definitely have even more empathy for that to stand out.
Yeah. It was interesting that sometimes when you're watching episodes, I think his name Dallas Jenkins, the guy who created the show, he'll talk about the show. Mm-hmm. And he's mentioned a couple of times that they have 7 seasons planned out. Obviously, it's based on funding. They want to eventually do that. So I'm wondering how far out their plan is, because it looks like if they did a season 3, I think it might be season 3, or maybe they can stretch it to season 4 before they actually get to the crucifixion.
I mean, I could see it going a couple ways. I could see them waiting until season 7 to get to or season 6 to get to the crucifixion, like end season 6 on that, and then season 7 is the aftermath, or something like that. I could see them stretching that out because they are still early in Jesus's walk. I mean, they're only at the Sermon on the Mount, and yeah. I think we're going to see half of season 3 being, because there is footage of the Sermon on the Mount that they're going to use for season 3 as their opener. So we're going to see more of that. They easily could do something too where they don't show that right away, but they show you parts of the Sermon on the Mount through season 3. I could see them doing that and like constantly bringing out these flashbacks. That would be a really smart way to do that.
That's what I hope they do, because I was thinking that I think it was a very clever way they do it. We know it's the Sermon on the Mount. They're gearing up to it at the end of the season, but we don't actually see it. He's walking up to do it. And then the season ends. So I think it would be more compelling if we don't see it all in one chunk.
I agree completely. And that's why I think that they could easily go that route. So I think there's a lot that they can do, but that is for them to like end it possibly on the crucifixion and resurrection stuff. And then Jesus ascends into heaven and that's where they stop it. I would be like, no, I want to see Acts now. Go into Acts. And I want you guys to do a show about Acts, because so far, this is in the right hands. I know we're only 2 seasons in, and sure, season 2 was a little weaker than season 1, but I attribute that mainly to Nicodemus's arc was just so stinking good. And so it's hard to top that. And the thing that they did, you mentioned with Mary, where she walks away and then comes back, that arc didn't like grab me too well. But the rest of the season 2, I liked the conversation he had with what's the Roman guy? Cephas? No.
Gaius?
Yeah, maybe.
The guy who was with Matthew.
Yes.
That's Gaius.
Gaius. I loved that conversation, like when he sits him down and they're having that like back and forth and the threatening and all that. And like that's really good writing too, because like how would Jesus respond to that? You don't see Jesus' response too much to the Roman officials. So how would he talk to someone who's clearly brought him in to threaten him? How does he act when he's arrested? Because he was arrested a couple times, and there are other times that he was able to escape and elude it. And so it's like, how was he in those circumstances? And they gave him very believable dialogue where he didn't back down, obviously, but he also wasn't aggressive. He was just, you know, he knew he had the power, but he knew that he also wanted to let him, Quintus, there you go, Quintus.
Quintus, oh, that's right, yeah.
Quintus to feel that he had the power, that feel like he was in charge. But,
yeah, and another thing is that with Jesus being so non-traditionally confrontational, with James and John, Jesus told them, like, yeah, like one day I will give you authority to do the things that I do. And they're like, man, we're going to take down our enemies, do this and that. And Jesus is like, well, maybe I'll have to hold back a little bit on giving you that authority.
Jesus has some really funny lines. They do some really good comedy in this show. I like in the season 1, and then they're on the way to Samaria and or maybe it wasn't there, but whatever. All the disciples are asking him questions. He's just like, listen, if I have to explain every single decision we make, it's going to be really annoying for all of us.
Yeah.
And it's just like, he's totally like, that's a dad move. That's exactly how a dad would be. But, you know, he clearly loves his kids. So he's not like shaming them for asking questions. He's not shooting them down, but he's just like, we're not going to be doing this. Let me set the boundary here.
Yeah, I'm getting that a little bit. So I've been watching through Lost with Charlie, and we're in season 3. And every now and then I'll say something like, oh, that's not actually what's happening. He's like, what are you talking about? They just said that. I'm like, remember, I've seen all 6 seasons. I know what's going to happen. This is not a black and white show.
Well, don't ruin it for him. Just so you know, that foot is a foot of an Egyptian god. And it gets wrecked at the end.
I'll tell him, sometimes I'll tell him, like, yeah, we don't find out about that until season 5 or season 6, but I'm not going to tell him, like, yeah, the Black Rock, Jacob brought people on it and crashed through the island. This, you know, this isn't about Lost. Let's take it back.
Yeah. On this side note, though, I don't know if you have parents like this, but my mom is so good at, like, when she knows I've seen something before, or even when she doesn't know if I've seen it before, she asks questions while we're watching something. I'm like, you know what, Mom? I'm pretty sure they're going to explain it at some point. Like the first 10 minutes, who's that guy? You know what? I think we'll find out. You know, it's like, just watch the movie. Most movies fill you in. There are some ambiguous ones, but most of them make sure you're not left in the dust.
Yeah. You know, every now and then, I not so much anymore, but I used to actually watch TV with my mom quite a bit. And I remember when the Gilmore Girls revival came out, like 5 years ago, I actually watched through the entire thing in one shot with my mom.
The revival.
Yeah, no, not all 7 seasons. We didn't watch 7 seasons of Gilmore Girls in one shot. That'd be a lot.
Yeah, I know. I've been watching. I know how much that is because I'm at the end of season 3 and 3 weeks of binging this, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm starting to get to a point, like, I'll bring it up to Angie. She's like, this is so weird for you to suddenly start talking about Gilmore Girls. And for that for at any moment, you could suddenly bring up something Gilmore Girls related. I'm like, yeah.
Matt actually had a text chain about Gilmore Girls a little bit the other day, and Matt initiated it because I believe in May, we are planning a Gilmore Girls episode. And so Matt, in preparation, is watching through the show. So if you watch Gilmore Girls, or just stay tuned. That's coming.
Yep. Great. All right. Oh, technical stuff.
Yes. Back to The Chosen, which is what we're actually talking about.
So season 2, I like that they tried to branch out into other technical stuff too. Like there's the one episode, maybe this was the 3rd episode, that they opened with like a 12-minute uninterrupted shot, and they had been practicing it all day because it was a shot that takes place at dusk. And so the camera follows all the movements of these different disciples and is constantly like going, you know, like it's focused on one of the disciples gets in conversation, and then he's with like a couple other disciples, and then the one that was focused on leaves that conversation, but the camera stays with these new ones, and that like it keeps picking different targets that it's tracking with, and it takes, like I said, 12 to 13 minutes. They did not have that wide of a time frame because this was supposed to happen at dusk. And if you watch the episode and that scene, it's so cool that they were able to get it when they did, because it was their last shot for that day, and or their last chance, that is. And they got the shot that they needed. And you can watch, if you like start at the beginning of that scene and then like immediately jump to the end of that same scene, you can see the difference in lighting. You can see the difference that 12 minutes made in the sun going down. And it's like yeah, you can do that in post, but it wouldn't be nearly as good as what they were able to do. And so they were very ambitious with that. And I love that they had the ambition to do things like that shot.
Yeah, it is very technical. I mean, I don't know, technical, but creative, like the good combination of that. Like you said, a lot of Christian media is like, it doesn't matter as long as we get the message out that Jesus is good. We're like, people aren't going to watch it if it's not good.
Yeah, exactly.
Back in college, there was me and Matt both went to a Christian college, and there's this big contest called Battle of the Floors where everyone gets a theme and you put on a big skit for the show. And our floor, we were at the funeral of Michael Jackson in our skit.
Okay.
And they made a joke saying something about this is a contest called Making the Christian Band. It's like making the band, but with lower quality standards. And it got a big boo from the crowd. Because we're doing that in front of like Christian music majors.
No, I'll be different. I'm better than this. Which, to be fair, Christian music got better before Christian film and TV did. Christian music got better early 2000s, late 90s. There was some good in like the 90s, like DC Talk was pretty solid. And then Toby Mac went into a solo career of his own and he did like a lot of good stuff. And now like there's some really awesome Christian music out there. So it's not like this is still the case, but there was a while that it was that way.
Yep.
So not hating on it, but here's the tie-in to that. So earlier this week too, if you listen to Movies on a Monday, Terrence and I also talked about some good Christian movies. There are some really good Christian movies now, and I love that they're getting better. And I don't know if we haven't recorded that yet. So even though that was in the past in your timeline, in my timeline, I haven't talked about it yet. But like the most recent really good Christian movie was The American Underdog, the Kurt Warner story. And that works really well because they did a good job of like, yeah, faith was important in his life, but it was every part of him. And it's not like every single thing he said was Christian. It's like you listen to us, and every now and then we'll have an episode like this where it's all Christian, or we'll have other episodes where it's like we bring some Christian thoughts into it. But I mean, we don't talk about Christian stuff all the time. We have a very normal life that just the foundation of it is in Jesus. And so it's great to see movies that are being able to do that, where it's like, let's focus on like real things, real people, real life, and how Christianity fits in a real life versus like the idealized Full House sort of life where everyone, all my problems are solved by a conversation. That's it. That sort of thing.
Which, while we're on the subject, we didn't think to do this when she was actually on the podcast, but if you are interested in a podcast that actually has more Christian themes, Matt's wife actually does a podcast of more Christian themes. So what's that called again?
Live Free. She also has a tattoo that says Live Free on her arm.
Yeah.
And so that came before the podcast.
So if you want to, in addition to, not instead of listening to this podcast, go check out Live Free, and you can listen to both Rodenbergs.
We lose all of our listeners at once. Like, that sounds so much better.
And then if you listen to Movies on a Monday, you get triple Rodenberg, which might be overload.
But the good news is one of those Rodenbergs is Angie, and she's great, and you love her. Not you. Well, I mean, I hope you. Well, I don't know if I hope you love her. I don't know.
Maybe in a different way.
I hope so. You guys have that connection point of the red hair thing.
Yeah. Oh, about a month ago, I did hug your wife when I saw her at Quick Trip.
You punk. How could you?
Yep.
That's it. Podcast over.
It was funny. So Angie and her sister came on for the Friends episode. And it was afterwards I messaged Matt like, should we have plugged their podcast while they're on? And you were like, it's weird how you thought of that and I didn't.
I try not to support my wife, that keeps her humble.
Yeah.
Where did we go? What were we talking about? We always do this.
I think our tangents aren't as bad this episode.
That's true. But we do typically have attention spans of goldfish.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes.
I've heard of I don't really have anything else really major to talk about with The Chosen. I think we got all of my thoughts in there, unless you had anything else, Matt.
Yeah, because we talked about the future of it, or a little bit of the future. Mm-hmm. And that, so we got pretty much everything. A lot of great character. We didn't talk about every single character. I mean, like, if you had to say like what the main character was, I would maybe lean towards either Mary or Peter. Those are both two like the high, or maybe even Matthew. Honestly, Matthew, there's so much from his perspective.
Yeah, I would still say Peter. I think Peter, it would be. Traditional show would be billed first as like, starring Peter. And I would agree how they do it. They have like at the end and what's his name as Jesus.
Yeah. He on his Twitter, like I can't remember when it was, but the actor who plays Jesus, he posted a picture of it. He's Catholic, so he posted a picture of him meeting the Pope. I'm like, how cool would that feel? Be like, hi, I'm Jesus. And Pope would be like, no, you're not.
You said that like you didn't cast yourself as Jesus in a movie we made for Youth Group.
I did cast myself as Jesus. That's true. When you write and direct something, you can cast yourself as Jesus, and no one will second guess you to your face.
It might be fun. Okay, this would be like a podcast for like 3 people, if that. If any of you who know what we're talking about are listening and would like us to do a bonus episode about those movies, I think that'd be fun.
That would be terrible. And then you guys would be like, the ones who don't know that and listen in, you'd be like, I don't know anything that's going on, but it sounds awful. Or it sounds amazing. I don't know.
2 of the movies that Matt wrote like 10 years ago for our youth group, and they're starred by leaders and students from the youth group that we were both part of. I'm in both of them. Matt's in both of them.
Yes. They're like, okay, I've for a long time, like I hated on them because there was some stuff that's like, you compare it to a Hollywood movie, there's definitely issues. You compare it even to a typical indie film, there's definitely issues. But we did a movie, man. We did 2 movies. Like that's an accomplishment on 0 budget. I guess the budget was whatever the church felt like they wanted to spend and like for buying tapes and stuff. But we put that together. We did that over the course, like both times was about 2 months or so, or maybe 3 months of work. And we did that. And because like we did the best we could do at the time.
Yeah. I did a lot of most of the editing of it. You did a lot of the production writing part of it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's like we did the best that we could with what we had. And it's like I don't want to hate on that anymore. Like I used to, but I want to be proud of it.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. We even went on location. We actually got off school to let us come in and film school scenes and different stuff on that. And we had so much fun doing it. Like I think it made it into the final cut at one point. So I play a teacher it's called Jeremy.
I loved it. I know the story you're telling. I'm so excited.
Well, there's 2 of this one. So I was supposed to be writing the board. I just drew a crappy picture of Abraham Lincoln and wrote like labels, hat, buckle, beard, as if that was my lesson plan.
If I recall correctly, Paul drew the picture of Abraham Lincoln, but he gave him a buckle hat, and so you mocked that relentlessly.
Yeah,
and you're just like, so the question you might have is, why does Abraham Lincoln have a buckle on his hat? Is Abraham Lincoln a pilgrim? And if so, did he come over on the Mayflower? And you're just going off on this tangent about how inaccurate it would be for Abraham Lincoln to have a buckle on his hat. And Paul and I are just laughing because we're just getting B-roll footage of you teaching. So we just needed footage of you teaching. Mm-hmm. And we were going to, it didn't really matter what you were saying. And it was great. I loved it.
Yeah, and I had an improv that actually made it in. I was supposed to say like, you can make your presentation, but I was supposed to be kind of snarky, so I was like, "All right, Caleb, dazzle me," or no, Jeremy, whatever his name was, and
It was good. I mean, it fit. It's exactly what a teacher that doesn't so much care about his job would say. And you kind of had that as your character. You're like, I'm just here. I'm here for a paycheck.
so I guess Paul, Dan, and Brandon, I think you three have listened to the podcast. If you're listening now and you want to hear us talk about it, let us know.
That would be, man, too bad we don't have more people who listen to it. If only I had like the footage of it, then we could post it on our Facebook and you guys could go watch it, and then you could come back and be like, wow, that was something.
I might have it. I'll have to look.
In Jeremy, there was a line that got left in because I either Paul or I, the way that we edited something, we left this in as a joke because the end of one scene was like Jesus was giving like this charge to Caleb, like, this is what I would like for you to do. This is what I want for you to do. And so Jesus like, so do this. And then like, that's kind of how the scene was supposed to end. And so then instead of saying cut, because I'm in front of the camera, I'm like, or I'll kill you. And then Caleb starts laughing. Whoever it was, either Paul or myself, kept that in to give to the other person. I think I kept that in because I'm like, Paul's going to edit this out because he's going to know we shouldn't keep that in. But I wanted to make him laugh, and he kept it in the final product. And so it made it into the movie, and that character does die in the movie. And so like, the actor who played Jeremy, he tells me later, he's like, my mom didn't like the movie as much just because she didn't like that Jesus wanted Caleb to die. And I'm like, no, that's not the lesson we're trying to go for here. Jesus didn't kill him.
The Chosen doesn't portray Jesus as murderous for the sake of comedy. Maybe that's where we went wrong.
We might have made a mistake at that point. Yes. In thinking back, there might have been an issue. Oh man, this is a lot of fun reminiscing. I'm sorry for those who aren't on the inside of our inside joke, but hopefully you at least got the context and enjoyed it as well. And for those who are on the inside of that, oh man, that was fun. Those were some good times. And I know I'm going to do more creative stuff. Like, our podcasts are great. I know I'm going to do more creative things. I'm writing for our town community theater. I'm adapting a version of Christmas Carol for this next December for our local theater to do. So that should be a lot of fun. I'm not going to do any like big like gimmicks. I'm just going to do like an honest interpretation of Christmas Carol. And I think
that reminds me,
like that.
I want to give a shout out, congratulations to Christmas Carol enthusiast and former podcast guest Mike. Him and his wife Monica just had a new podcast listener come into their family. They had a baby girl that was just born, I think today or yesterday. And I'm sure, to soothe them, they are playing that baby hours and hours of TV Guys.
Exactly. It's going to be a Jeffster situation, that the only way that the baby's going to be able to calm down is to the sound of our voices.
Yep.
I like that. It's like, oh shit, they didn't have a new baby. They had a new podcast listener added to their family. That is the worth of people in the eyes of Brian. Like, hey Brian, this is Jody. Oh, Jody, a new podcast listener. I mean, a new friend that I could possibly have.
So congratulations to Mike and Monica. And Monica, I have started watching Ted Lasso, so you can take away your shame on me.
Take it away. Get it out of here. Speaking of football, I've started watching Friday Night Lights. So Dan, shout out to you. And I think there's a couple others. We have a number of people that like Friday Night Lights, but I know that Dan, I think, said that's his favorite show. So got you, Dan. One episode in. I'm in there. I'm in it.
That was good. Should we jump into trivia before I think we're at just tangents right now.
We are a full tangent mode. Yep, go for trivia. You had last week's.
Last week, I'm also going to give another shout out. Before this episode even aired, I ran into a former coworker of mine who might come on as a guest, and I was telling her about the trivia, and she got it right. So my former coworker Bree got the trivia answer right, which was, how many seasons of Survivor featured Rob and or Amber? Answer is 7. Amber was on season 2, did not win. Rob was on season 4, did not win. Rob and Amber were both on season 8, the All-Star season. They both made it to the finals. Amber won over Rob. Rob was again on season 20, did not win. Rob was on season 22, and on his fourth try, he finally won. Rob was on season 39, not as a contestant, but as an advisor. And then they were both on season 40, and neither one of them won.
There you go. That's impressive that she knew that seven times. My guess was not that. So
yeah,
I think I guessed something like 4 or 5. But man, you know what? I want to, because of that, I want to become a reality TV star. That is my new dream in life. I've got a dream, man.
All right, be that. I mean, talking about Survivor. What do you or like? I don't know what direction you're going to go with that.
There was a character in not a character, but a person from the TV show The Circle. We talked about that one last week for a reality TV show, and she was in like another reality TV show. So she pops up on The Circle, and there's like a couple of people like, "Oh, is that so and so from this show?" And I'm like, you know what? Who just like decides that's my calling? That's what I'm going to pursue. I want to do reality TV. That's my life. And if it's only on Jerry Springer show, so be it. All right. So this week's trivia is there is an actor in this show that actually came out of retirement in order to play the character on this show. So you can either give me the actor or the character. So which character is played by an actor who came out of retirement just for the chosen TV show? And if that's too easy for you, the creator, Dallas Jenkins, he is the son of a popular author who wrote a big Christian book series. So which book series was that?
Would it be too much if I gave them a hint for the first one?
Probably.
All right.
That one's decently easy.
All right, sounds good. We'll skip that then.
Skip it. Well, this is fun. I loved it. I love the chance to finally talk about Chosen because ever since I started watching it, I'm like, I got to tell as many people as I can about this show. It's so good. I went to people, I was like, come and see. Line from the show. So if you haven't seen it and you got to the end of this, it's such a good show. It's a different type of show where it's like we can ruin things in it for you and parts of it. But at the same time, if you're interested in the show, you probably have read the Bible. And so there's a lot that you're going to be like, I know what's going to happen in that. Hey, spoiler alert, Jesus is going to die at some point in this show. So if you haven't watched it, and you're like, oh, they probably ruined it. No, go watch it anyway. You're going to get to see some great stuff.
You know, I've said in the past that I don't like when they kill a character off and then bring them back. I'll be okay with it in this instance.
They explained it away well enough, so I'll give them a pass on this one. So go check it out. Enjoy your Easter. Eat lots of food. Find lots of eggs that you hid. Don't steal kids. But until next time, I'm Matt.
Before we do that, should we tell them we're doing next week?
You just threw it all out. No, I'm done. I'm out. Podcast over. No, next week. Go ahead.
Next week, we're going to do the first of what will probably be future episodes going forward, talking about animated shows. Because let's face it, animation is way too broad to squeeze into one episode. So we're going to be talking about adult-oriented animated shows. I want to not say adult animated shows because that sounds different, but you know,
that's right. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We're going from talking about Jesus to talking about South Park and Family Guy. You're welcome.
That's true. Those kinds of shows, Simpsons, Futurama, all those shows, we're going to talk about them, what we like, what we don't like, and then hopefully we'll have more episodes about different types of animation in the future.
That's it. So stay tuned for that. It'll be great. And then we've got after that, because you mentioned it earlier, we've got a Ted Lasso episode coming soon. So end of the month, you're going to get Ted Lasso. It'll be great.
Yep.
Until next time, I am still Matt.
I'm still Brian.
I reminded you to stay tuned and keep watching. Podcast over.